Welcome to the study session where we are breaking down the BCBA 6th edition test content outline. Today we are breaking down Task A.4, which requires us to distinguish among behaviorism, the experimental analysis of behavior, applied behavior analysis, and professional practice guided by the science of behavior analysis.
This is a classic Domain A topic, and while Domain A only makes up about 5% of the exam, roughly 8 questions, Task A4 is famous for being a trap task. If you can't tell the difference between a researcher in a lab and a practitioner in a clinic, you're going to lose points on the other 175 scored questions.
Exactly. Think of these 4 areas as the 4 branches of our science. Let's start with the first branch, behaviorism. According to our sources, behaviorism is the guiding philosophy of behavior science.
It's essentially the worldview. The core idea here is that behavior is a result of interactions between individuals and the environment.
Right. And as a philosophy, it completely rejects mentalism. For example, a behaviorist wouldn't say a client engaged in a tantrum because they were mad. Instead, they view the tantrum as a result of the environmental/individual interaction.
I like to think of behaviorism as the soul of the science. It tells us how to think before we even touch a data sheet. But once we want to start finding the actual laws of behavior, we move into the second branch, the experimental analysis of behavior, or EAB.
EAB is the study of behavior principles to be later used outside of the experimental setting. A key point for the exam is that EAB is not applied research.
This is where the lab coats come out. If you work in a lab with rats and you're doing operant behavior research to see how a specific schedule of reinforcement affects their pressing of a lever, you are doing EAB. You aren't trying to solve a social problem yet, you're just discovering the fundamental laws of the universe for behavior.
Exactly. You're doing the research, but you don't apply that research outside of your lab. But, eventually, we do want to see if those laws work for humans in the real world. That takes us to the third branch, applied behavior analysis, or ABA.
Now we're getting into the applied part. ABA is defined as applying behavior principles to research in offices, clinics, schools, etc. on human subjects.
The research part is what students often miss. In ABA, we are still doing science to find out what works for people. The source gives a great example. You are studying the effects of punishment on your RBTs.
Wait, punishment for the RBTs? That sounds like a tough workplace. But it's a perfect example of applied research because it's a socially significant setting involving human subjects. You're testing a principle to see if it produces a reliable change in a real-world environment.
Precisely. So, we have the philosophy, behaviorism, the basic lab research, EAB, and the applied research, ABA. That leaves us with the fourth branch, professional practice guided by the science of behavior analysis.
This is what most BCBAs actually do all day. It's the delivery of interventions to consumers.
It is guided by the principles of behaviorism and draws from the research of both EAB and ABA, but the focus is on the actual interventions used in the real world.
I think the easiest way to distinguish them on the test is to look at the goal. If the goal is discovering a law in a lab, it's EAB. If the goal is researching an intervention with humans, it's ABA. If the goal is providing a service to a client using proven methods, it's professional practice.
And if the goal is the underlying belief system that behavior is lawful, it's behaviorism. You really have to be careful because the exam loves to give you a scenario where a BCBA is working in a school and ask which branch is being demonstrated. If that BCBA is running an experiment to publish a paper, it's ABA. If they are just implementing a plan to help a kid stay in their seat, it's professional practice.
That's a subtle but huge distinction. It's the difference between creating new knowledge and applying existing knowledge.
Exactly. These 4 branches work together like an ecosystem. EAB finds the laws, ABA tests them on humans, professional practice delivers them to the public, and behaviorism keeps everyone's head on straight regarding the philosophy.
It's a lot to keep track of, but once you see the hierarchy, it makes total sense.
If you want to test yourself with some scenarios on these 4 branches, check out www.bcbamockexam.com for practice questions.
Catch you later.
Bye.